program to start and for life to return to what it was before. I'm not going to say get back to normal because I'm not sure we want to get entirely back to where we were, which is part of the talk today. So I wear a number of different hats. So basically, I'm here today to talk about two things. One is I have a role as a Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at my university, which is the University of the Fraser Valley here in the Vancouver area. And I'm also the CEO and the president of an organization called the Discovery Foundation. And our role is to foster the development and sustainability of the tech sector in British Columbia, in our region, and with a particular focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and on regional development in some of the smaller communities too. So I'm kind of bringing a bit of my experience that I've had, both observing and taking part in the development of the tech sector, and also my experience as a health educator. I've been a health educator for almost 40 years now at the post-secondary level. And so I've kind of blended that together with my observations, my experience with tech and business. And I hope you'll enjoy the presentation and have some questions for me at the end.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. So maybe we can go with maybe some marks that we can follow here, especially on the issues of mental health. So I would like to ask you first that I know that some of the participants today are kind of curious about the mental health, but I feel like some of our already, they don't have any maybe some tangible knowledge about these issues. And I would like to ask you first, like what do you mean? What do we mean by mental health, especially in the business wise?
Right. Well, maybe I can jump into the presentation then, because I think I answered that question there. So with your permission, I'll start sharing my presentation with you, which is this one. And you'll just let me know that you can see it okay. Give me a thumbs up there.
All good.
All good? Okay.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to focus on, yes, it's about mental health, but it's the first thing we really need to do is define what we mean by health. So it's an excellent question, Honor, to start with. So we talked about what I could present to the group here today, and what I'd like to talk about is on a personal level, how you can maximize your health, but also how you can maximize the health of your team, your teammates, and also your organization. So it's an organizational perspective. And the first question, so the objectives here is what does it mean? It's answering that question that you just asked, Honor, is what does it mean to be healthy from a personal level and an organizational level? I'll talk a bit about personal health for CEOs, and a lot of that relates to mental health and psychological health too. How we develop healthy teams and leaders, and then what the lessons that COVID-19 has taught us. And I hope we've been listening for the last year, because Mother Nature has taught us some very important lessons. So we'll start with this is where we're getting to, Honor. It's a nice segue to start the presentation. What a definition for health, and if you look in a health textbook, there's various aspects of health, but often when we think of health and we think of our healthcare system, we think of physical health, which you can see is one of the elements here, but it's only one of the elements. And we'll start with that. But there's also, your social and psychological and emotional health, your financial health. You can see spiritual health in here, which is not, it could be religion if that's your choice, but it could also just be a sense of purpose, which is important from an organizational perspective as well. And also environmental health, not just the global environment, but your local work environment too. So there are a number of different factors, part of which, as we're saying, is, social, mental, psychological health. And that's what we'll kind of focus on a little bit here. But these don't just apply to individuals, they also apply to organizations. So you can look at each of these aspects and ask yourself, are we actually optimizing each of these in our organizations? And if you do, then you'll find that your organization is much more productive and much more successful and a much happier place to work. And I really believe that quality of life equals profit in companies. So we need to think more about our culture, our corporate culture, our organizational culture, and we need to think more about our organizational health in order to improve that bottom line. So in terms of personal health, and I assume I'm speaking mostly to CEOs of early stage companies or people that are sort of C-suite personnel. And so you really need to lead by example. Often the CEOs are overworking themselves. Their life is out of balance, and they end up in poor health. And when the CEO is in poor health, the organization will suffer. So you need to prioritize your personal health and lead by example. And so I ask that you be intentional with your actions in terms of your health. So don't just talk about it. They need to be actions, and they need to be actions that you apply every day in your life. And so the first thing I'm going to ask you to do, and I can't see the chat box, so Honor is going to help me here, is to determine your non-negotiables. I'll ask you this again in a second. What is it in your life that is non-negotiable outside of your company or your organization? Second, and this is a very key one that is challenging, but I'll give you some tips about how you can manage your time more effectively so that you create more balance in your life. And a third tip is, and by the way, in this whole talk, I'm trying to keep things simple. So I keep it to like groups of 3. I'm not going to overload you with different things you can do, but in general, when we start our days, we often do a lot of we start our work days. We do a lot of the little stuff first to kind of get it out of the way before we tackle the big stuff. It turns out it's way more effective just to dig into that hard or important stuff first and get it out of the way, and then do the little things that are less important later. All of this is really fairly easy and straightforward. You just really need to hear it, and then you need to make it a part of your life. So let's go back to this notion of a non-negotiable. So I want to ask you, and I'll ask the group here today, just to put in a word like, if there is something that you absolutely will not change your mind on, something that's of utmost importance to you in your life that you will not sacrifice on account of your work or the development of your company or anything else, what are those non-negotiables? So if you wouldn't mind just typing a few words into the chat bot, and I'll let Honor just let me know what some of those are. Oh, maybe I can see the chat box. Is it up at the top there? I think I can actually. Okay. Okay, I'm seeing them. I'm seeing them. Okay, Honor here. So I remember. I think Roseanne was here last time too. So any other words that that come to mind? What would you not sacrifice? What is dearest and nearest to your heart in your life? Okay, we just have the 2 there. People are probably waiting for me to tell them what it is. Anyway, so I certainly hope that if you have a non-negotiable, that your first non-negotiable is sorry, I just need to advance here. Oh, I know the chat has stopped my ability to advance now. There we go. So these non-negotiables should be related to those aspects of health. So generally people, I would hope that at or near the top of your list of non-negotiables would be your own physical health. Again, if your physical health is suffering, everything else will start to diminish in terms of its success. So you need to focus on your physical health for sure. And I'll tell you 3 simple tips for that. But people generally say, well, my family and friends, they're non-negotiables, but then are they actually non-negotiables? Because often it's our family and friends that are sacrificed because we need to get things done at work. We need that time to spend on work, and we sacrifice our time with our family and friends. So if you want to improve that as a non-negotiable, you really have to make that intentional. So one example is, and I'll just ask the group again in the chat, in the last year, in the last calendar year, how many days have you spent completely disconnected from your company and your coworkers? In other words, no text messages, no emails, no work at all. So I'm just trying to think, roughly how many days have you been completely disconnected from work? And just type that in the Q&A there too. Zero.
I see some zeros here, and I'm really sad now, guys.
Yeah, well, and you know what, the average, when you talk to CEOs of startups, the average is about 2 to 5. So, you know, often it's like Christmas or some religious holiday and their birthday, and that's about it. Um, you can easily improve that greatly. And the way to do that is to make it a non-negotiable. And you can, if you want, make a single day of the week, every week, a non-negotiable day off. And I know you'll think, well, I'll just get a little bit done and then I'll go for my walk or spend time with the family. It's important that you disconnect completely from that workspace to give your brain the chance to recharge, so it's not thinking about work. Because as you know, what will happen is we do that little bit of work in the morning, we're off for our families and friends, but we're thinking about what was happening at that workspace in the morning. So I know people that are CEOs that actually have a second cell phone and they don't use their work cell phone at all during that one day off. So whatever day it is, Saturday, Sunday, or whatever day of the week, I encourage you to think about that. Trying to take a single day off. It might mean you work more in those other days, but that one day break a week, now you're going from 0 or maybe a few days to now you have 50 days a year that you're recharging your brain. So very important in terms of your mental health as well. Self-actualization, you could also call this me time. Are you actually disconnecting from everybody? Are you actually spending time just thinking about nothing, daydreaming? This is actually very important for the creative process. And then financial security. This should be a non-negotiable as well. You should have some kind of a financial plan that you're not willing to compromise for the sake of your business. So prioritizing that physical health. I'll go into that a little bit more in the next slide. Truly making time and space for family and friends and socialization that doesn't involve any talk of work. Me time, your alone time, and then thinking about your financial security and your financial future should all be non-negotiables for you. So physical health, now I'm a health educator and it's really simple, but almost none of us do it well. There's really 3 key things for our physical health, and that's food, sleep, and exercise. And when we're busy, we tend to compromise all of these. We tend to sleep too little. We rise too little. We work too late. We tend to skip exercise. We don't prioritize that. So that becomes something you do when you have spare time, which is not the way to look at exercise. It's a very important part of our human biology. And food is the worst because there's so many of these crappy convenience foods. You need to prioritize real food in your life. And the problem is that these things all make each other better or worse. So if you sacrifice any of these, it will affect the other ones. In other words, if you're not exercising, it affects the way we metabolize food. It affects our sleep. If we're not eating well, that'll affect our performance and our sleep and so on. So these 3 things, just say that to yourself every day. Think about food, sleep, and exercise. Get a nutritious meal, make sure you get a decent amount of sleep and some exercise. That helps balance the body physically and also mentally and psychologically. So real simple. Here's a couple of tips that you can all practice, and they're sort of easy things to do. When you do have that spare time or mean time, you can do, as well as physical calisthenics or exercises, you can do mental ones too. I'm not saying this is going to keep your brain sharper or it's going to improve your memory or anything. We don't know about that. What it does do, this is a crossword puzzle or a Sudoku or whatever. What it does is distract you because you need to think about that rather than whatever it is you're thinking about. So it's a deliberate distractor, and that deliberate distractor allows your brain to just relax and disconnect from what it was, and then approach that problem or challenge or workload in it with a fresh mind. Better still is something called a nature bath, and you may have heard this term of a nature bath. They just did a study recently, I think it was at Yale, and what they did was they had 2 groups of people, and it may have been a crossover study with the same group, and they had them do a mental challenge by time. So I think, you start with 1,024 and you subtract by 17, and you have to go as fast as you can in 30 seconds and see how far down you can count. So it's very mentally challenging and stressful deliberately, but obviously not harmful. And they compared people who were just in their office space, just taking the time off for 20 minutes, to people who had taken a little 20-minute nature bath. So literally getting out in the greenery, smelling the air, looking at the greenery and so on. And the results were remarkable. The performance and the level of anxiety is much better, and your anxiety is much lower after this nature bath. And they've determined that that the optimal amount is about 200 hours a week. So that's, you know, a couple of hours, which is maybe a half-hour walk every day and maybe a longer walk on the weekend or something. But again, disconnecting, get out there and get into nature wherever you can, you know, parks or the wilderness if you have that opportunity, and try and do that on a daily, weekly basis. And that makes a huge improvement in your mental health and your mental performance. And here's a third one. You know, yoga is good. It's a form of exercise too, but balance is good. And one of the things I recommend, which sounds strange, is, you know, those balance boards. If you can get yourself a balance board, start using that. You'll be surprised how that activity of the balance board, the way it triggers our cerebellum, the way it makes our brain think, it's not just a disconnect from the work and the stresses there, but it literally balances our psychology as it balances our body, because your brain is working to maintain that balance. So here's an easy tip is, you know, we all brush our teeth a couple of times a day. So when you brush your teeth, just stand on one leg. Just do this tree pose, stand on one leg while you're brushing your teeth. At least you're, you know, you have to brush your teeth anyway. So at least you're getting a little bit of balance in while you're doing that. And there's all kinds of other little tips, but I just thought I'd throw these three out there for you as a way of creating that true balance in your life. So moving on to organizational health then, and we'll talk about leadership at the end. So it starts with this this spiritual sense, if you like, that component of health, what Simon Sinek calls your just cause. So in terms of your organization or your company, your startup, what is your just cause? What problem are you trying to solve for humanity? And I've showed this in my last presentation too. This is sort of it's a characterization of Simon Sinek's start with why. Organizations should start with why. So ask yourself why you're going to work every day. What is it that you're doing today that gives you purpose, that you feel has value to the rest of the world? So on the left, you can see what's your purpose outside of the profit, outside of having something to do, outside of your career. What is your actual personal purpose, and how does that value align with your organizational purpose? So what's your cause? What's your just cause? And remember, when you have your product, is people don't buy what you do. Obviously they do, but I mean, in terms of their psychology, the buyers buy why you do it. So if your purpose and your just cause is clear to them and they align with that, then it's an easy sell. So how does your organization solve problems? And this relates back to the last talk I gave. You know, most organizations, you throw a problem at them, they'll get together, you know, the CEO leads the discussion, you know, ask for people to brainstorm and so on. But probably we do that because we've watched others do it and we've grown up in that. But there are better ways to do it, better ways that are more inclusive, more diverse, and more productive. And really, I think the best way for an organization to solve problems, and when you think about it, your startup is probably solving problems as well, social or commercial problems. So healthy teams innovate. And one of the problems with remote work, there's two issues that come up with remote work. I mean, with remote work, a third of people love it, a third of people hate it, and a third of people are okay and they'll go either way with it. What does suffer when everybody's working remotely, as we have been, is innovation, because innovation tends to happen when people are together in person, or it happens faster. And you can use tools like Zoom to innovate, but it's more of a challenge. There's something about reading people's body language and that fast exchange of ideas. You know, on Zoom, everybody can't talk at the same time. That's lost. And the other thing is social cohesion. And we lose that when we work remotely. So healthy teams are teams that innovate. And you may remember the film Apollo 13. And there's that famous point in the film, you know, where the oxygen supply is disrupted and they have to kind of move they have to solve a really big problem. And they have like a day to do it. And if they don't do it, the astronauts are going to die. And basically, the boss comes down to the engineers and he says, here's all the stuff we have there. Fix it, make it work. And this was like a sprint. It was you have to solve this problem, you have to solve it now, and it has to work. So the pressure is huge. But because the teams there at NASA are innovative teams, they're designed around really early days of design thinking, they were able to work collectively and collaboratively, and they were able to solve that problem and get the astronauts back safely. So I'm a big believer and an advocate for design thinking innovation. We won't talk about that too much today, more about the results. But If your organization wants to be an innovative and healthy team, then I strongly encourage you to think about employing design thinking innovation, because it is inclusive. Everybody gets to take part, and it is the fastest way to create the best innovations. And these are the four elements, really. The key element here is you start with empathy, is the end user. And this is the same thing. You can use design thinking innovation to solve problems in your own life or your own family. It doesn't have to be for your organization, but you need to have empathy. Empathy is key, both to a healthy organization and to the design thinking process. And then through that empathy, always keeping the end user involved, you do some deep thinking about the problem. You use creative methods to come up with a multiple number of solutions. Again, think of that Apollo 13 situation. And then you distill those solutions down into the actions that you think will work best. You try them out, you iterate, and relate back to the end user. So in the Apollo 13 case, of course, the end users were those astronauts up there, and we needed to get them back. So that's the simple process. But the three keys there, which is also part of establishing a healthy culture in your organization, I'll get to in 1 second. I just want to show you, I also delivered a design thinking innovation campus, and your organizers have this. I sent it to them. So we won't talk about this anymore today, but if you'd like that, you can get in contact with the organizers, and they can provide that for you. It's a tool you can use. It works best if you have an external facilitator, but you can use this internally. And I think the previous talk was recorded as well, if you want to revisit that. So the 3 C's of innovation, I call them the 3 C's, that sort of fit in the middle and tie this all together, are curiosity, creativity, and collaboration. And these are fun. These are life-affirming, interactive, and healthy ways for people to work together. So when people are being curious and creative, and they're working together on something, there's a great deal of goodwill and support and cooperation that comes, and it creates harmony in your organization rather than competition. And so if you tie those together with innovation, it's kind of a state of mind. It's really a reframing of how we're looking at a problem, and coming up with creative solutions as a group collaboratively. And when you're doing that and you're doing it effectively, you have a good idea that you have a healthy organization. So that's why I say innovation is a state of a healthy mind. And so let's look at what those conditions are. So let's look at your own organization and see what conditions, compare this to what you have, and see how close you can come to what might be an ideal. So when you have to adapt to change in particular, this is almost the definition of innovation, is adapting to change in a positive way. So let's throw COVID-19 in as something that provided that change that was unexpected. First thing is that innovation happens in networks. Again, innovation being the definition of a healthy organization, ones that innovate well. So networks, you know, on the left, you've all seen these. If you're in a larger organization, the traditional management structure, you know, with the boss at the top and the senior managers and the junior managers and the workers. And this is a very good way to organize things, to organize, you know, payrolls and organize reporting systems. It's a good way to manage. And because the people at the top of larger organizations tend to be more bureaucratic than innovative, they like this because it provides them with clarity. Innovation, on the other hand, is messy and ambiguous. And innovation happens in social networks. That's why most innovation happens in larger cities or universities, where people gather together in large numbers. Again, the importance of that ability to meet in person. And this is where the creative and innovative and supportive networks develop, and they develop organically. You can help facilitate them, which I'll show you in a second, but they you need to foster that environment. So as I say, what you need to do is recognize its importance and then just leave it alone and let it happen organically. There's a good book on this if you'd like to read some more by Niall Ferguson, called The Square and the Tower, which looks through history at networks versus social networks, and how the traditional management structure versus a social network, and how really innovation is sparked every time that we try and break down this traditional hierarchical model and we free people up to work more collaboratively. And now we can do this on a global scale. So I want to talk about space and the challenge this has provided by COVID. So creating the space for innovation, literally the space mentally, but the space physically as well. these collaborative environments, which is probably something like your workplace used to look like a year ago or so. But these are important, these so-called serendipitous collisions of people. Maybe they're not from the same area of your company, or they're from different companies, or you're in a co-work space. These spaces have been demonstrated to be very productive. People may be working, but they also are exchanging ideas, and it's a free-flowing, natural, organic way of innovation to happen. I had the privilege of being at Cambridge University in the 90s, and in the biology department, which of course, where DNA was discovered in Darwin and so on. So it was a very great place to be. And the best, most innovative places were, we had tea twice a day at 10 o'clock and 3 o'clock. And everybody would go, and you just sit around and chat about things. And even better still was at 5 o'clock or 6 when we'd go to the pub and continue those conversations. So the innovation through serendipitous discoveries is important. You can make this more intentional as well. And the other thing is to not be, sometimes we have this work ethic. We think, well, we have to be working hard and very serious all the time. In fact, that can get in the way of innovation and creativity. And so what's important also is the notion of play. So I'm just going to take a sip of my tea here while you read that from Charles Schaefer. So as you're developing your corporate culture, your organizational culture, don't be afraid to be playful with it. Have fun, and that can be on the job. And it's not just having a ping pong table or a foosball table in your space. Actually, it's okay to have fun and laugh and joke around and be playful with things, because that helps to spark that creative and healthy psychology. So now just lending a little bit of discussion, leading the discussion into leadership. So on a personal level, as leader of your organization, what are the kinds of things you can do to foster that healthy work environment? And first ask yourself this question. Often there's not just one co-founder, but there's two. And it turns out with most really successful organizations, there might have been this idea monkey, and we tend to celebrate the idea monkeys. These are the super creative people that have the vision, that come up with the 10 ideas a day, 7 of which are crap, 2 of which are not bad, and 1 of which is pretty good. And they just generate these ideas. And sometimes I'm one of those people, and I had one of my managers at work saying, I hate idea monkeys because they make work for everybody else. And I said, I'm not going to apologize for that. You keep telling us to, think outside the box. That's what I'm doing for you. And the reason is that they're ringleaders. Ringleaders are the doers, the productive people, the people that can take those ideas and make them real. They're the ones that take inventions and turn them into commercially successful innovations. So the best organizations have two. Not necessarily 2 CEOs, but 2 people near the top or at the top, one of which leads the conceptual idea monkeys, the other one who is the more pragmatic person that makes things happen. Of course, everybody's on the spectrum. You're not one or the other. But I just like you to think yourself if you tend to be more of an idea monkey or more of a ringleader. Sometimes we're asked to be one or the other deliberately, and that can be the case at times. So here's some examples. I just want to give you some examples in the past of some, sorry, I've got a, the one thing I didn't turn off was my phone. Hopefully that will answer. I'm sure nobody important is phoning me at this time of day. So idea monkeys and ringleaders in history. And again, you can monitor the chat there, Honor, see if people know the answers to these questions. So I'm going to give you the idea monkey. You tell me their partner that was the ringleader. So Walt Disney, who was his ringleader? Anybody, any answers coming up there?
I don't see any.
Okay. It was actually Roy. And they look alike. They can tell they're brothers. Roy was so shy and so introverted. Walt Disney was complete visionary, and Disney is still a really innovative and visionary company. It has his stamp all over it. But Roy was the guy that made it all happen. Disney would have gone nowhere without Roy. Roy created the business and created Disney. It's one of the largest companies on the planet right now. So Walt was the visionary. What we all know about Roy was the guy that actually made it all happen. Here's another one, Orville Wright. Okay, who is Orville Wright's partner? Orville Wright, of course, known for the invention of the airplane, although I think it was Alexander Graham Bell that made the first one. But who is his partner? Anybody, anything coming up there? It's kind of a trivia question. And these have an American focus. I'm not, these two do anyway.
Yeah,
somebody raised a hand there. Somebody has a question.
Yeah. You also have an answer on the chat box, as you know, it's
Oh, we do. Okay. I'm not seeing that one. So anyway, the answer is surprising. Yes, Wilbur. Wilbur was his brother. So Orville was the visionary. He wanted to fly like a bird. Wilbur built bicycles. He had a bicycle shop and he built bicycles. But a person with a vision to fly and a person that builds bicycles, you're not quite there yet. You need someone who actually understands aerodynamic. And this is the person that's forgotten, and it's shameful. And that's actually, it's Catherine. Catherine actually was the one that she had a bachelor's degree in physics. She understood aerodynamics, and she was the one that gave them the design and never gets any credit for it. So it's shameful. And considering yesterday was International Women's Day, I think we should start recognizing women's contributions, both in the past and present. Stephen Jobs, but you might remember his partner. That's sort of more recent. Any quick guesses there? Steve Wozniak. So again, Jobs, the visionary guy. Wozniak, the guy who built, he did code and he built chips and things like that. So the two of them built the first Apple computer together. Jobs, could program for sure, but he didn't know how to build computers. And Wozniak didn't have the vision. He was just making up these sort of plans and giving them away at computer sessions and so on. And last one, again, a British example, I guess. Ada Lovelace, you may not remember her name, but Ada Lovelace was actually the daughter of Lord Byron, the poet. And she was actually a tremendous visionary. We wouldn't be doing any of what we're doing right now today without Ada Lovelace, because she actually was the first person to invent computer code. Without computer code, we wouldn't be doing anything. She's a genius in mathematics. She was quite a scoundrel herself too. But anyway, Charles Babbage was the one that was, if you look at the first computer, he had the, I think it was called the thinking machine or something like that. And it was basically something that could add, subtract, multiply, and divide with all these gears and things, but it needed code to work. And Ada Lovelace was the first one that not only, you should read about her, not only did she invent the code, but she was able to project out into the future. And she predicted many of the things that we're seeing today, including artificial intelligence. And this was back in the 1800s. So let's give some credit the day after International Women's Day to Ada Lovelace as well. So those last leadership qualities, and I talked about this at the end of my last talk. Again, if you can see me there, it's in your hand. If you look at your fingers in your hand, there's 5 qualities for leaders, and then we'll look at how those leaders and apply that in their teams. First of all, vision. So that's the first finger. So if you hold your hand up, you can remember this easily with your fingers. So the vision is what you point with. It's the number one thing. It's the first thing, the first finger that you use. So the leader has to have the vision. It has to have the vision and share that vision with the rest of the team and maintain that vision on a daily basis. Authenticity, that's the central finger, which runs right down your arm, and it's central to everything else. You must be yourself with all the pluses and minuses that comes with. When people start being somebody else, they start sounding like politicians, and we stop listening to them because they're not speaking their own words, and they're not speaking from the heart. They're saying what they think that you want to hear, or they're saying something that there's prepared to, rather than just talking to you. So as much as possible, just be authentic. And authentic leaders are often a good example of an authentic leader would be Elon Musk, because he just says who he is and what he does, and he doesn't apologize for all the good and bad things that he is as a person. So always be yourself. You need to be accountable. That's the next finger, which is, in Western culture, that's the ring finger. That shows your fidelity with your family and your partner. But that's the accountability and fidelity and loyalty to your team and to your organization, and also to yourself. So don't pass the buck. If you own it, and take it and do what you need to do with that when you make mistakes, and also share the wealth when you have successes with those that contributed to it. So everybody's accountable, everybody's rewarded in the team. And vulnerability, that's the little finger, which we sometimes forget about. So that's why I put it there. Some people think this is the most important characteristic of a leader, is vulnerability. Again, is the ability to let others see your flaws, and that you don't know everything. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. In fact, a good CEO should be hiring people that's smarter and better than them at everything. So eventually, at the end of the day, they end up being the least smart people in the room, but they have these leadership qualities that helps drive the team together. So don't be afraid to be vulnerable with your group. And again, it's a short talk today, so we won't go into too much more detail there. And then the last one, the thumb, the opposable digit that allows us to turn our inventions into innovations through our hands, that's the empathy. So empathy with your team, empathy with the end user of your product, and empathy with yourself, being kind with yourself, but also seeking to understand and listening, like listen to your team. Don't just listen for 2 seconds and start talking over them. Stop, listen. If you have a team meeting and you're the leader, maybe say nothing. Just let the whole team talk and then summarize at the end. So listening, truly caring about your team and truly caring about the user of your service or product is key, both to design thinking innovation and to strong leadership. So in the end, when we talk about the teams, so now taking that leadership to your team and working in collaboration, because innovation happens in teams. Inventions might happen individually through sparks of genius, but innovation, making those things real and tangible, happens in teams. And Patrick Lencioni has written a very popular book about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. So if we start about what teams don't do well, you can see at the bottom, the key element there to a functioning team is trust. You must work to develop trust. If there's an absence of trust, everything else starts to fall apart. And think about that in your past when you've had good leaders that you will follow and leaders that you don't trust, and you start disconnecting, and that's when things start to fall apart. Fear of conflict. People don't like conflict, but you need to have healthy conflict to work through innovations. Healthy conflict is where you simply disagree, but you, again, in an empathetic way, you ask the other people why they're coming up with that thing that you disagree with. You try and understand their perspective. That's important. So we need a healthy amount of conflict. You need to actually draw that out of your team and respect it. And lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, we talked about that, and inattention to results. I'll frame those in terms of some of the evidence we have. So, absence of trust, the invulnerable demigod leader that you don't trust personally, that's going to cause things to fall apart. Artificial harmony, and we've all seen this, people pretending to get along at meetings, and then after the meetings, they go and they start back talking and backstabbing, and that creates a lot of problems that are really hard fires to put out once they start going. Lack of commitment, what you see when you have a lack of commitment is ambiguity, people not sure what they're doing or why they're doing it. Remember that sense of purpose. Avoidance of accountability, passing the buck. It wasn't my fault, it was their fault, it was the boss's fault. That's going to lead to low standards throughout. And then the inattention to the end results, that empathy with the end user is the best way to measure that result. That's really about personal ego and politics. It's not really about good business or about a healthy organization. So when you're seeing those things on the right, if you're seeing that in your team, then you need to go back and start building up those elements, and you have to start with trust. So with effective teams, again, trust is most important. And if we look at performance, your ability to do your job at a high level and trust on this continuum, we have these sort of sectors. What you don't want is towards the axis there with low performance and low trust. You want to sort of move out on that 45-degree angle towards high performance and high trust. And then the other question is, if you don't know, what should we choose? And this is where we make mistakes often when we're onboarding new employees to our companies. We look at performance and we look at what they've done before and what they are on paper and what they've been able to do. We don't spend enough time looking at trust. We don't ask them the sorts of questions that would allow us to determine whether they're going to be a trustful team player. You must have complete trust amongst your team. We call it a circle of safety. So you need that circle of safety within your team. Everybody has everybody else's back. that allows everybody to come forward with the most important question that you need to ask, is when do you need help, right? Whether you're the CEO or the lowest person, if you need help, you need to be in an environment where you can say, I need some help. I've got some stuff happening at home. I need some help. I need some support here, whatever it is. Again, that's going to build health within the team as a social unit. So again, if we look at that performance and trust, now I've taken some movie examples because I like movies. So if we look at somebody who's very high performing but zero trust, versus the high trust and zero performance, I'll give you some examples there. In the last talk, I used the example of the Navy SEALs. And again, this is the US military spends more time on high performing teams and more effort and more research than anyone. So we can learn a lot from them despite their, military roles, which is distasteful, of course, to everyone. But they do a job and they do it well, and they're in fours. And the key thing for entry into training, because remember, very, very few people get to be Navy SEALs. It's like 1 in 1,000 or so that apply at the beginning. And what they look for first is not performance. They don't look for the highest performing people. They look for the ones that have the most trust, because ultimately the team members, they're always in teams of 4. They must have the ultimate trust that they literally have each other's back in a field of combat. And so they would much rather, because they can teach performance, but you can't teach trust. Trust has to be earned, and it has to be a characteristic of you. Are you a trusting person, and will people trust you? And so again, those movie examples, we want to be as far out on that 45-degree line as possible. Again, this will build a healthier organization. So if we look at a high-performing, low-trust person, the example I have is like Gordon Gekko. Remember, he's an evil, corporate raider on Wall Street, completely self-interested and cynical, probably pathological, and a real person, but very, very high-performing. I mean, if you measure that by how much money he made gazillions of dollars, basically throwing everybody he knew and under the bus to get there, but zero trust. I mean, you wouldn't trust this guy with anything. You wouldn't trust him with your piggy bank. On the other hand, a very likable, trustworthy character like Inspector Clouseau, who is sort of, a bumbling fool performance-wise, although he usually wins in the end in the movies, but kind of a bumbling fool, but a very likable, nice guy. So that's the other mistake we make, is sometimes we onboard people because we really, really like them. We think they're great people. And then you get them and you realized they don't have what it takes to improve their performance. And then they become a liability. So you don't want either of these people on your team. And so when you're onboarding people, yes, you can look at performance, but don't discount trust. And of course, what you want is on the line here. And so the example I gave, again, International Women's Day yesterday, but I like this example anyway. One of the greatest heroes, I think, of the last 20 or 30 years is Ripley. This is from Aliens 2, I think. Completely high performing. I mean, she solves all kinds of problems, basically, world and universe threatening problems. And would you trust her? Absolutely. You'd trust her with whatever. You would put her, you would get behind her 100 times out of 100, because you have complete confidence that she will have your back as well. She'll come back and get you. Remember, she comes back and gets her cat. She comes back and gets a robot, and that's important. So there's some examples. And then for the effective teams, the way you establish trust in your organization is to give it to somebody else. If you find yourself tending towards the micromanaging, start trusting your employees to show you, to allow them to demonstrate that they can do the job you're asking them to do. So the best way to earn trust is to give trust. Start and tell them that you're trusting them. Tell them, I'm giving you this assignment. I realize it might be a little bit out of your sweet spot, or it might be a little bit above your capacity, but I think I think you can do this. I trust you to do this, right? It's like the manager of a baseball team trusting somebody to get up there and get the hit that they need to get. You put that trust in somebody and they will trust you back. Even if you're not successful, you'll still build that trust. Not successful at that one instance, but others. Valuing others, learning about others, again, listening and learning about your team and valuing what they bring to the table, valuing people's differences, their diversity, and being inclusive. Demonstrations that we're in this together, again, team building exercise, but also supporting people that may have failed. So remember, success and failure are not a binary. Failure is on the path to success. So if your team has had a failure, you sit down together, everybody owns how they contributed to that failure, you learn from it, and you move on as a stronger team together. So everything is shared as a team. Good ideas are shared as a team, and failures are shared as a team, so you can learn from it. Again, creating that safe environment, the local and both, the physical environment, but the social environment needs to be a safe environment where people think that they can say what they truly feel without repercussions that might affect their job or their livelihood or their position or their promotion. And that's hard to do. It's hard to get people to do that because people say, well, this is what I think, but I can't say that because so-and-so will get upset if I do. And this is a challenge. I mean, somewhat, political correctness sometimes gets in the way of that because people don't say that people are shy about saying things because they don't want to offend people. Well, you have to, obviously nobody wants to offend anybody. Nobody wants to create an environment like that, but we have to kind of have an environment where people can talk about their own vulnerabilities in that regard. So they can say literally that, I'm afraid to say something because I'm afraid to offend somebody. And then people can respond to that and say, well, what would you say that you think might be offensive? And then it's an example that the team can work on rather than something you've said to somebody to offend them, right? Be clear and transparent at all times. Anytime that, when you don't have transparency, you're gonna be eroding the confidence and the trust in the team. So be very clear. And the way to be clear is to say things again and again and again. You just repeat things, you repeat your values, you repeat your mission, you repeat your just cause over and over again. Be very clear about and intentional, and also be very transparent about the process. Now, being transparent doesn't mean you can't do things in confidence. Sometimes in business, we have to do things in confidence, but you can be transparent about that process and why you're maintaining that confidence. And then lastly, demonstrating competence. As the team has successes, learn from that about what it was about the team and the team members and how they contributed that allowed them to create that success. And then you can leverage that success for future success. So just to end in the last couple minutes, what have we learned? I talked about this throughout COVID to some degree, but COVID-19 has been, a horrible pandemic. A couple of million people have died. Many, many people have been very sick. Some people are still sick. In the next year or so, hopefully with the vaccines, we'll get by this. Remember that vaccines were produced by healthy and innovative teams as well, all over the world. And but I think in a way, Mother Nature taught us a lesson here. And we need to listen to that lesson. We need to be aware of what we've learned in the past. So one of the things we've learned is expect the unexpected. I love it. Now I teach pathology too, and my whole career I've been saying there will be another global pandemic. It's only a matter of time. And anybody who teaches infectious disease or pathology has been saying that. And basically the world has been sort of saying, yeah, well, maybe we'll deal with it when it comes along. Well, this is what happens if you're not prepared. We did have some levels of preparedness, but because it had been so long, almost 100 years since the last true global pandemic, although I would argue AIDS was a global pandemic. Remember, almost 30 million people maybe died of AIDS worldwide. But if we look at that sort of spectrum, we started to put pieces in place, and then we started to disassemble these global surveillance systems, for instance. And Canada's has to own that one. We had a really good global surveillance system that we disassembled because we didn't think we were using it, and it was expensive, and you cut costs. So always expect the unexpected. You never know what's going to happen. Never assume that today is going to be the same as yesterday. That's not what innovators do. Innovators are looking for change, and when that change happens, good or bad, they look to optimize their performance, to be able to pivot, to be able to take advantage of the new opportunities that will arise. Even when bad things happen, that creates opportunities. So be adaptable, be agile, and be resilient. And this would be each of those could be a whole other talk, but your organization needs to be able to pivot to adapt to these new changes. And Stephen Hawking, I think, famously said, intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. And so be intelligent as an organization. Make these things, agility, resiliency, make them part of your strategic plan in your organization, so that when something does happen, you can put that into effect without having to go back to square one. Be kind to one another. I think we've learned it's important that we have to, there are times when we need to come together to solve global problems. COVID was one we actually did pretty well. When you think that we went from a year ago at 0 to having a global distribution or near global distribution of multiple different vaccines, that is, as a biologist, unbelievable, unfathomable even a couple of years ago. So we can solve big problems, those wicked problems, when we want to, if we think collectively and we're generally kind and considerate to one another. One thing it exposed all over the world is we do a crappy job of caring for our elders. Our elders are these giant depositories of wisdom and experience that we ignore. We put them into long care facilities and seniors homes and that sort of thing. And we need to, throughout the world, I mean, some do better than others. I mean, Denmark is an example that it does a very good job of caring for their elders. I'm speaking here in North America. I don't know about each of your own personal countries, but you know, the numbers of senior homes and the care that seniors were receiving in those homes was deplorable in some cases, and it exposed that. So it taught us that we need to think longer term, be more inclusive, not just in terms of the other aspects we usually think of, but also fight ageism. So you don't need a team of young people necessarily. Older people have a lot of wisdom and experience that they might bring to bear. We sometimes call them mentors, you know, or entrepreneurs in residence or something like that, but they can be part of your team. And, you know, in our First Nations, the elders, which are usually older, but it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing, they're the most respected people in their communities because they are the keepers of the wisdom and the experience. As I mentioned earlier, remote is working. We've actually done very, very well transitioning to remote. We did a good job of that using things like this. It actually created, again, some opportunities. I wouldn't be speaking to you today, probably, if we weren't working remotely, because it costs a lot of money to fly me to, you know, where it is, Istanbul or Armenia or wherever to come and talk to you in person, but we can do this now. So remote can work, but we do know that innovation and social cohesion suffer. So that's an opportunity there, as well as if we do have to do this in the future, and we will, we'll be doing this again. How do we do this better? How do we do this? How do we create innovative environments when people can't physically get together? And how do we foster that social cohesion when people have to socially distance? And lastly, I have a question for you. There's actually, I think he's at Oxford. If you took all, I remember there's, I can't remember how many million people, hundreds of millions of people that are now infected with COVID-19 at this moment. It's a massive number. And if you think of the trillions of COVID-19 particles, the viral particles that are in each of those bodies, and you took all those particles and you compacted them into one single space, think about the hundreds of millions of people and the trillions of particles, and you pack that all in one space, how much volume would that actually be? And usually people start thinking in terms of Olympic swimming pools or whatever. It's about, I'm holding up my teacup here. It's about the volume of tea that's left in my teacup here. It's about 150 mils. So we must respect Mother Nature. We must look after the planet. If we don't, Mother Nature will correct this problem for us. And what she's shown us is I can take one viral particle and put it in one person in Wuhan, China, and I can shut down the whole global economy for a year and, you know, kill millions of people. We have to respect that tremendous power. We have to think about socially and environmentally innovative ways we can solve these problems. We have to solve the problem of climate change. We have to start thinking about what the maximum carrying capacity on this planet is for people. We never talk about that. And I just like, you know, I'm 60 years old now. When I was born, there was about 3 billion people on the planet. And it took, you know, millions of years to get to that point. From 1 billion to 3 billion took a lot less time. In my lifetime, the population of the planet has more than doubled, and almost all of the global environmental problems are ultimately overpopulation problems. So at some point, we have to ask ourselves as a species, when is enough enough? We don't have the ability to go backwards in terms of our development, and we're overstripping the ability of the planet to provide what we're asking it to provide. So we need to ask those hard questions, and we're going to need innovative solutions to those. So So that's the whole picture, I guess, of personal and organizational health. I'll stop sharing my screen there, and I'll open it up to questions. And thank you again for spending some time listening to me this morning. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you for this, rich and actually wonderful presentation, and thank you for, sharing us this, approach into this, mental health, especially in the terms of business. During the times of this, lockdown and the deaths, the pandemic, I mean, all the, the issues related to the pandemic. So I would like to go back to the, chat box if we have some questions awaiting there. Maybe,
Sure.
we can respond to them. I know that, we are kind of about to exceed our time here, but maybe, we can develop some, fast responses to some questions here.
I'll keep the first one short, and then I can hang around longer if people have more questions. It's only the start of the day here, so I have a little more time.
Thank you. So actually, I would like to go with Marina's question here. She's asking that, in her previous workplace, she used to hear fairly often, but there are no irreplaceable people. As a reminder that for them or anybody else can be replaced with anybody at any time. So in her words, I don't think it's a healthy mindset. It's hostile, and I protested that a lot. That eventually made me quit. What do you think of this?
I know. I completely agree. At my university, and it's, it's a university, I guess it's very typical. It's about medium size, maybe 14, 15,000 students. But I know we're hiring a new person, and I'm sort of looking at this new hire. And two of my colleagues that I've been working with for more than 20 years have decided to retire recently. And I've watched the rest of the team, and you remember them for about 5 minutes. And then you just move on to hiring the next person and getting on with it. So it makes me feel, when I'm now thinking about my retirement, and I've sort of talked to my wife, and I said, once I'm gone 5 minutes, they won't think about me at all. They might remember me, on a friendly level or whatever. But in terms of my contributions and so on, I think that's a little bit of our own egos that we have to just admit to. However, if you feel as part of a team that you can be replaced easily and quickly, what kind of trust are you going to have in that team, right? So what you need to do is to show each of the team members the value they have, and you value them. Yes, you can say you value, well, I give you a salary, I gave you a raise, that's fine, but you need that interpersonal validation of the contributions they're making. Celebrate their successes. Let them know, just tell them how important they are. I mean, just saying thank you, even when somebody's just doing the job that they normally do, just if you're a CEO or you're a supervisor, just saying thank you on a regular basis really makes a difference. So you can start with little things, but ultimately it comes down to the culture of rewarding and recognizing and valuing. Remember, we talked about that effective teams, they value one another. So you have to kind of work on that culture in a broader sense. But I share her feelings. I know what it's like to feel like you could be replaced easily, and often that happens in bigger organizations for reasons that are kind of evident.
Thank you, David. Thank you for the answer. And I am going to, and I would like to actually, I definitely feel like this, and I would like to forward to Rosen's question here, that maybe you already went over during the presentation, but I would like to recall this, that some companies like Netflix stated that once their staff gets vaccinated, they will get back to their offices worldwide. Is it because of the physical space connection rather than intellectual?
I think one of the things that we were surprised about as we moved to remote was how effective and productive people could actually be at home. We still have this it's almost like a 19th century mindset that a boss has to be there watching their employees. We have that, the picture of the sort of the workspace with the boss with the glass window on his office, and he's overlooking all his employees, and going around, and people don't work effectively like that. And what we did learn is that if you let people, if you just define their job, be clear about what your expectations are, and you let them work when they want to, where they want to, that people are actually more productive. You don't have to spend a lot of time commuting, for example. And so I think yes, IBM learned this. So part of the way back in the 90s, when we started with this ability to remote working, IBM did an experiment with that. And that's where that a third rule. About a third of people that were working remotely liked it and preferred to stay that way. A third of people hated it and wanted to get back to work as soon as possible. And a third liked the mix and like a little bit of the flexibility. So I would say we take the best out of that. Do you need to be physically with people to maximize innovation? I believe that's true. I do these, design thinking innovation workshops, and I've stopped doing them because I don't want to do them online with, little breakout groups and things. You probably could, but it's just not. I like to interact and read people and see and get that room excitement going. The laughter that happens and watching other people innovating is kind of fun, and hearing other people's ideas as they just fire them out is so you need to do that in person, but do you need to do that every day? So I think where we're going to end up with, I think we were on a road to more remote working anyway. We just accelerated that. And I think what we will see is that when people need to get together, we will. But the notion that, we have this again, universities are terrible. We have all these meetings every month, whether we have anything to do or not, and people get together and some people like to talk and so it's just, to me, it's a colossal waste of my time. But if there's a real purpose to it, so when you meet, is there a purpose to it? And does that involve a process where your participation will be valued? Then I think you get together. If it's just a matter of getting work done, then I think the best thing is to let the employer, the worker, choose when and how they're going to do it, as long as they get it done according to your timelines.
Impressive. Thank you, David. So actually, we are kind of exceeded our time, but there is one question actually I want to kind of create a mashup of another question here.
Okay.
That Rosen has this question that what do you think? What can we prepare from now on for? So like if there will be other pandemics or other disasters, other natural problems that we will come across throughout the year, further years. So do you think like I don't want to call it as a something like like future seer or something like that, but I would like to bring this issue that, do you feel like this? Do you feel like we need much more progress and much more like digital revolution, transformation, or this kind of stuff ahead to cope with the incoming and unknown problems and disasters and further?
Yeah, well, there's the known. We have enough big known problems. We could talk about that for a while. And then there's the unknown things. We knew that it was possible that a global pandemic could happen. So we just weren't as prepared for it as we could be. We'll be better prepared next time. COVID's not going to go away. It's going to be like the influenza, and we'll be vaccinated probably every year or every couple of years with booster shots for a while yet. And there will be other ones. I mean, it's really just it's a cold virus that kills, and there will be other ones. And we have other ones, antibiotic resistant bacteria as well, which are becoming a challenge. So on that biological perspective, there's an issue. There's some environmental perspectives. And then there are, things that we don't hear that much about, rare resources that we're running short of, or that are controlled by small numbers of very militarized nations and so on, and even water. I mean, I think water is going to become a huge issue. It's more evident in some places than others. And in Canada, of course, we've got lots of it. And again, I would say all of these relate back to overpopulation issues as well, which we need to challenge ourselves with. So what we need to do to make it work best is we need to stop electing strong leaders politically. Strong leaders, or populists as they're also known, do more damage than good. They create division, and that's how they become strong leaders, is they have kind of an us and them, and they're not inclusive. They don't believe in diversity. They don't believe that the better solution is to work together. Every time people put that aside and they decide to tackle problems as a group, we show our strength and our humanity. So again, be kind to one another, put the politics aside. The great thing about the internet and social media and so on is we can just work around the politicians, right? We don't have, they affect our lives, of course, but we can also just say, I don't care what they say about who we should and shouldn't talk to, or what we should and shouldn't do. I'm going to do what I know is right. And what I know is right is the collective good of the planet is more important than my individual things. And sometimes we just have to sacrifice that. We have to say, you know what, I'm gonna have to sacrifice a little bit because it's better for other people, and I'm not gonna gain from that. Altruism, if you want to call it that. I think we started doing a lot of that after World War II, frankly. I think with the, development of the United Nations and the development of some, the World Health Organization, we started thinking like that. And then again, it was the politicians that started disassembling that since the 80s, really, since the Reagan-Thatcher era, and I'm speaking politically now, but we've been eroding what we were building in terms of a global social democracy. And I think if we work back towards that global social democracy, I have a lot of hope for Joe Biden in the United States. I think it's a start. And we need to be electing more leaders like that, and we need to stop listening to these strong leader people who are trying to divide us and not unite us. So I think it's partly a political solution. It's partly a personal solution.
I strongly agree. And also I strongly agree with the reality of the today's polarization is one of the biggest political threats waiting ahead and waiting today. This is one of the this quote unquote unknown threats circulating around us. So thank you, David. Thank you for this rich conversation and for the presentation. And it was personally exciting for me. I hope that participants also enjoyed it as well. Yes. So thank you, and thank you. Please, I was going to share my anything over there.
I was going to share my last slide there. I don't know if I still have it, which has my it has my do I still have it up here? Oh, there it is. Sorry. Has my contact information on it. So I'll just share that again, and people can contact me directly, or they can I'll get the share screen here, and that's the one, I think.
Yep.
And then if I do that, there we go. So there, I have slightly different names on LinkedIn and Facebook, but if people would like to connect with me there, that's great. You can send me, I put my university address up there. You can send me a note at the university. I love to hear feedback on my presentations, both good and bad. That's my empathy with the end user. I don't really get to speak to the end users today directly, but I really do like feedback and constructive criticism, how I can make these presentations better, more engaging, more informative. What you liked and didn't like really, really helps me. So if you would do that, I would really, that would be, if you got something you want to thank me, you can put it in the chat box, but even better still is send me a quick note. That would be great.
Thank you, David, and thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you our partners here at Startup Grinds, and thank you for thanks everyone to joining today's session. And also I would like to remind you that this talk is a part of the Boost program that we have been running in UNDP. So as a part of the program, we will be circulating this video around the participants. But if anyone from the participants today want to reach out to this video, the offline version of this video, and you want to, circulate in their, spheres, we would like to help them. We would like to share it with them. Please reach out to us on boost@undp.org, and we will be responding you with the link of this video as well. So thank you. And David, I wish you a good day ahead. And depending on the different time zones, I wish you good morning, good evening, and good night, guys. Thank you.
Sure. I'll hang around a bit too on our as we're signing off. I'm just reading some of the other Q&A here too. Yeah, maybe if you can, since that's saved, there's the see, I get the Q&A questions, but I didn't get the chat. If there's a way for me to just get what the comments were, I wonder if I can just, I can probably just do I can't really do a screen grab. It's too big on that, but is there a way for you to send me the comments that came up? Is that possible?
I can do that. I can, just, capture some of the comments and forward them to you for sure. Yeah. I can do that. No worries.
I don't need the answers to the questions I asked, but some of the other comments, it just, again, helps me to tailor the talks to an audience such as this. Listen, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to your group, and I hope I provided some value to them. And it's nice to get to know you all a little bit. And I look forward to a day where we can actually meet in person and raise a glass of wine and toast a better future. We can work towards that in the meantime. And as I like to say, if you need me, you know where to find me. and I'm not I'm not going anywhere for another 6 months anyway. So anything I can do to help your organization or help the startup community in Eastern Europe or Central Asia, I'd be happy to lend my expertise. So I guess I'll
Thanks,
say
David.
goodbye. Rosanna, Noreen, Svetla.
And all of the participants who are kind of, leaving the
Oh,
living
I see. They're
currently.
still
Yeah.
hanging about. There we are. There's Rosanna. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. Truly amazing. Yeah, perfect. I enjoyed all the way out, David. Thank you for your time and for the beautiful presentation. And we'll definitely keep in touch.
Yeah, no, that was great. Yeah. And, in another year or so, there's actually another group I work with here who's doing some work in the former Balkans in sort of ecosystem development, and he asked me at one point if I'd be interested in going with him. So that might come up in the next year or so, which would be kind of interesting.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you,
Okay.
Thank you,
everyone.
David. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Have a great day, David. Thanks,
You
guys.
too. Take care, everyone. Stay healthy and stay happy, and hope to meet you soon in person. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye. Bye-bye.